Hello and welcome to Seattle City Makers. I'm your host, Jon Scholes. Welcome to our latest episode, everybody. I am joined by Alesha Washington, who is the CEO of the Seattle Foundation. The Seattle Foundation is our community foundation that is focused on making Seattle a stronger, more vibrant community for all. Alesha's been at the helm of the foundation for about 2 years now, originally from Cleveland, Ohio. She was the program director for Vibrant Communities and Inclusive Economy at the George Gunn Foundation, based in Cleveland. And prior to that, she held a role with the Greater Cleveland Partnership. She was vice president of government advocacy there. Cleveland Partnership is one of the largest chambers of commerce in the country, and she led their advocacy efforts at the local, state, and federal level on behalf of the Northeast Ohio business community. And now is leading a 75-year-old, well-regarded and respected community foundation here in Seattle, and one that is headquartered in downtown Seattle. And Alesha and I talk about her first 2 years on the job and what's been surprising, most challenging, most rewarding, her vision and set of priorities for the Seattle Foundation, the ever-changing role of community foundations in our region and across the country, and Alesha's first job, her perfect Saturday in Seattle, and her take on the Seattle Freeze. I hope you enjoy my conversation with Alesha Washington, the CEO of the Seattle Foundation. Well, thank you for making time for this.
Absolutely.
And congratulations on your 2-year anniversary, I think. 2
Thank
years in the
you.
role, right?
Yes.
And as of May 11th?
Officially
Is that the official
2
day?
years. Yes, I can stop saying almost 2 years.
Yeah,
Now
you
2
can't
years.
say you're new anymore.
I can't say I'm new anymore.
Honeymoon's over.
Newish.
Newish? Nah.
Yeah.
You're legit.
I'm legit. Okay, I'll take it.
So what in your first 2 years has been most rewarding? What's been most challenging? What's been most surprising?
Oh my gosh, all of the things. Most rewarding, I think, has been building relationship in this community. Like, you hear about the Seattle Freeze. I didn't know how to interpret that coming here, being new, not having spent time in this region.
But you knew about it.
But I knew about it.
Did you know about it before you got the job, or did people tell you about it after?
I read about it on the way here. And then when I got here.
On the flight here?
On the flight here, right? My
Before
Google
the
search on
interview,
the couch, once I accepted the job and was trying to better understand what I just said yes to. Right. And then when I got here, it was the first thing everybody would ask me about. It's like, have you felt the Seattle Freeze? I'm like, okay, this is a real thing that's happening. I should probably understand what it is.
But you haven't felt it?
But I never really felt it in deep ways. And so I feel like that's rewarding in the sense of like, I got really lucky and found community here pretty quickly.
That's great.
And then with my team over the 2 years building community within this foundation, people that trust me will reach out to me. Like, that feels huge to be not from this community and getting here and in 2 years feeling pretty solid in that regard.
And for those who don't know, you came from Cleveland.
I came from Cleveland, Ohio, born and raised.
Yeah.
So this was the first big move for me to get the one-way ticket and just.
And there's no freeze
spot.
there. Well, there's a freeze, but not that kind of freeze.
I don't think there's a freeze.
No.
I think
well,
we
here
have
or
the
there.
Midwest nice.
People
Expect you to say hello on the sidewalk.
Yeah.
Like, it's offensive not to.
Yeah. I think we've talked. I was born in Buffalo, New York, but I didn't live there that long, but I'd always go back. And super friendly people back that way.
Yeah. So
but you had a good experience here, so that's been rewarding.
They smile and wave when I'm walking or running. So, I take that as a good sign. Maybe I'm friendly.
Yeah.
Maybe it's working out for me.
So that's been rewarding.
That's been rewarding.
What's been most challenging?
Most challenging has been just stepping into an organization to help it think about how to evolve into the future and it not being a unique challenge just for Seattle Foundation. Community foundations across the country are at an inflection point of what are we going to be going into the future? Everything from how do we better serve communities and provide resources where they're needed to the marketplace looks different, right? When community foundations were created, there was no Fidelity that ran a donor advised fund business or a Charles Schwab or others in this space. And so from a market standpoint and from a community giving standpoint, the world is different. We have to figure out how to evolve and keep pace or not be relevant. And so that has been the challenge, but I think we're starting to make some good strides in that space.
And we'll come back. I want to come back to some of that
and
kind of orient people around your work and your new strategic plan and all those things. So what's been most surprising? That there wasn't a freeze here, or is there something else that comes to mind?
Honestly, it's the simplest thing, but I still get excited when I'm driving and I see the mountain. Like, I don't think it will ever get old for me. Like, oh my God,
that
look
big
at
old
this
thing in the sky.
Right? So I've thoroughly enjoyed that. And I'm surprised that it still gets me like giddy like that whenever I see it. Yeah, that's the biggest surprise.
A big mountain sticking up in the sky.
I just like, why is it there? Right? Yeah. But it's cool. It's cool. Yeah. That's the biggest thing for me.
Well, if the sun's out tomorrow on your trip to Vashon that we were talking about.
Oh my gosh.
Great view of Rainier off that ferry.
I am nervous but excited at the same time.
Yeah.
So I hope it's a good trip.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So how would you describe in layman's terms the role of a community foundation and maybe what it's been and been thought of and how it's evolving? Yeah. And then I want to talk about the strategic plan that you all have recently adopted.
Got done. Yeah, sure. In the simplest terms, community foundations were created as a way for folks within a community to pull their dollars together to then invest those dollars in building the infrastructure of a place, whether that's supporting the orchestra or the ballet or just giving to causes that they deeply cared about because they knew that it benefited the community at the end of the day. Then it got a little more professionalized from that initial starting point. And the term philanthropic bank has been used a lot, right? So dollars are held here. A staff helps to manage those resources and move those resources on behalf of donors. But over time, community foundations have evolved to move beyond just the transactional business of you put dollars with us, you want to make a grant, we help you make that grant, all the logistics that come along with that, to then having a point of view about what it takes to actually create really, really vibrant communities, whether that's from supporting the affordable housing issues that some communities face, or how to think about supporting organizing and democracy building work, whatever it is within that local landscape. Community foundations are now saying we have a point of view about what it means to support a vibrant, thriving place. And so we want to influence our donors to invest in that way, but we also want to get creative with other resources we can leverage to invest in those needs. And so that's a growth in the types of things that an organization would do. And as any nonprofit understands, if you start to grow what you offer, you have to cover the cost of what you offer. And so that's where many of us are today, of doing much more expansive work, much more innovative work, bringing new tools into the work beyond just traditional grant making, impact investing, other things to bring to bear, policy advocacy work, but want to resource that well to make sure it's of real benefit to community.
So a shift and an evolution from sort of receiving investment and then placing it to
far
really
beyond the transactional, much more into convening and advocacy and leadership.
And you have a perspective on how to solve a problem and are looking to rally resources from individuals, but also leverage those against others to make a difference.
That's right. Yeah.
Do you find that investors and those working with you are much more concerned about impact than maybe they were years ago, and sort of measuring and understanding impact as some of these issues seem to get more and more complex, and there's all kinds of players and ways to help and ways to give, but how do you understand whether you're making a difference? Is that higher expectation of those invested with Seattle Foundation today?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think that's just across the field of philanthropy in general. We've gotten really smart and strategic at how we spend resources in this field of philanthropy. And I think rightly so, you would expect that if I put my dollars into something, you want to know if there's going to be any sort of return of investment on it. The work that we do with our donors and try to do across the field is, yes, we want to make sure dollars are invested wisely. And so we always do the due diligence around, does the nonprofit have their IRS status? Like kind of the basic things in due diligence. So you know you're putting your money in effective places in terms of organizations that are established well. But we also try to work with donors to understand how to bring trust into their giving, that if you really want to give organizations the ability to like unleash their creativity, maybe let's not micromanage the way they use the dollars. Let's give them flexible general operating dollars, multi-years, even better, so they have some runway, and let them go and do. And then let's learn alongside them, because as you know, and as you noted, the issues are far more complex, right? There are no silver bullets for the affordable housing crisis that we're trying to deal with, or the homelessness crisis that we're trying to deal with. There are going to be a lot of different answers that you bring to bear on that. And that means that no one has the one right solution. It means we're going to do a lot of learning together about how we invest, how we learn from failure, but then we innovate and try new things.
And what does your strategic plan have you evolving to and pivoting toward as far as your priorities and bigger moves over the next 3 or so years?
Yeah. So this planning process, which was about 9 months total to move through it, lots of stakeholder input from fund holders to government partners to nonprofit partners, our staff, our board. It was an opportunity for us to really get clear about our North Star. And our North Star is to really envision a joyful community of shared prosperity, belonging, and justice. Flat out. That's
joyful.
What we want to do. Joyful, right? Because
it's not something you hear often in a strategic plan.
It's not, but it was something really important
How did that emerge?
For this work. And I think it's something I really tried to infuse into this work because
you write and speak about joy.
I write and speak about joy a lot, yes. Because I think the main point is, as you mentioned again, the challenges that we look at in our community are complex, but there are also opportunities here that are huge. For all the things that feel chaotic and hard, there's still beauty there, right? Like there is the challenge of homelessness downtown. There's also the fact that downtown is starting to thrive and people want to be here, right? And there's art and there are things to do. That's what joy is about for me, is that you can take the hard part with the beauty that's there. So it's not happiness, right? Of like these kind of fleeting moments of a thing. It's recognizing even in the hard thing, there's something really beautiful there. And how do we lean into that from an asset-based lens to recognize the good, even in the hard, and not just get stuck and kind of down on like everything that's wrong with the place, right? And so a joyful community is about really capturing that. And joy is also evokes something, right? When you think about joy in your own life, you're probably going to smile. You're going to think about your kids. You're going to think about your family or like your favorite things you like to do in your neighborhood. It evokes something for you.
Hitting the perfect golf ball.
Yeah, exactly. Hitting the perfect golf ball, right? Like for me, it's having the right pace on a long run and not stopping,
right? The kid stuff too.
Right.
I mean, the kids stuff
sometimes,
too,
right? But also you deserve your own joy, Jon, outside of the kids. I will respect that. And so that's the thing, right? There's a big smile on your face right now, right? And so that feeling that you get, I think everybody in this city deserves to have that when they think about what it means to live in this place, to work in this place, to be active here as a citizen. I want the folks that I talk to that say that Seattle was a great place to raise their kids and make a home. I want everybody that lives here to be able to say that, which means we have to make sure that systems are not a barrier to people having that kind of joy. And we're doing the things as partners across the city to make that true for people. And so this plan centers joy for that reason.
Love it. What I hear in all that too is like this recognition and appreciation for the assets and resources in this city and in this community and region, right? Which sometimes we get so close to it, you sort of lose sight that that's not the case in every part.
No, not at all.
Of the country.
Yeah,
not the case in Buffalo.
We've talked about this before, right? I mean, the scale of resource that is in this community
to solve the problems, address the challenges.
So it's like we have what we need. It's just a matter about how we collaborate around each other to drive towards solutions together, right? Having the courage and the will to make hard decisions, to stick together over the long haul, because none of these things can be solved overnight, right? We didn't get into challenges over 2 years and then think we're going to get out in 2 years, right? Like things around public education or housing, these are 10, 15, 20, 30 years in the making. So it's going to take some time to get out, but we have what we need to do that. And so our plan is about the type of collective action that we need to activate with our donors as well as with our external partners. It's about getting much more specific as a foundation about where we can lean in over a 3-year horizon. Philanthropy loves to put together big, lofty strategic frameworks that are hefty and intellectual, but it's like, but what are we doing at the end of the day? We've gotten really clear. Affordable housing financing, transit, and childcare are the things that we're leaning into. We're going to keep investing our grant-making dollars in the things that have been tried and true for us into BIPOC-led organizations, doing important organizing and advocacy work, but it's their work over the last 20 years that have led to being able to say affordable housing, transit, and childcare are the 3 things we think we can have some impact on over the next 3 years, right? And so
you
getting
get those
clear
right,
that
and
way.
you get a lot of other things
and then you see how it evolves,
right?
right? And then you continue to
bring a lot of joy
there.
by getting those 3 things done and create an opportunity for people.
So that's the external piece. And internal, it is shoring up the business. It is making sure that we are running a vibrant operation that supports this team and supports the people that choose to invest their dollars with us.
So how do you make that evolution and really having a point of view and perspective on 3 priorities with a base of donors, investors that over the years have come to you with all kinds of different priorities for how they want their money invested and going toward having impact in the community.
Yeah.
Are you looking to sort of shift and make a case to your existing investors for around the value of these three priorities, or are you looking to bring in other dollars and investors, or I imagine maybe it's a little bit of both?
Yeah. I mean, the nice part is that leaning into three areas of focus is like big plays for us. Is not kind of a hard left away from anything that we've been doing. Is actually looking at the evolution of what our work has been and naming some really specific things. So like as former lobbyists, we know the importance of being very clear and
with your language,
right, about the thing you're going for. So this was our effort to make clear the things that we saw without a lot of philanthropy speak, as we say, behind it. For our donors and our investors, many of them have been investing alongside us for years in these areas. And so I think there's some excitement about getting clear about what we see for the next several years. And then I think it creates the opportunity to bring new folks into the fold because now they see the clarity in what we're leaning into. And again, we're not abandoning the work that we've been long investing in for a long time, nor asking donors to necessarily stop doing the things that are personal interest into them to then do this. Because again, we're resource rich. So it's a both and here, right? We want to support them well on the philanthropy that matters to them and their families and offer them an opportunity to join us in other bodies of work that get us to that joyful community.
And is that evolution and point of differentiation a way that you see staying competitive with new entrants into the marketplace? You've mentioned, Fidelities and others earlier, like the for-profits that can make a case like, hey, we can do social impact investing with you. But they might not bring the same perspective, point of view, ability to leverage and focus around key areas and issues in the community. Is that what you see as kind of your big strategic point of differentiation?
Oh, yeah, for sure. I mean, I think there was a point at which probably like around 2017, 2018, community foundations had to get clear that you're not competing with the Charles Schwabs or the Fidelities of the world. That's a different type of daft business that is not geared towards what we do. And what I know, having been in this role, is that the thing that we will always have as core to our value proposition is like, I may cost more, yes, but the value of what you're getting here is deep community knowledge and insights that you're not getting from those guys. And to the spirit of working with commercial DAPs, it's like, how do we better partner because they have donors that do care about community and want to invest here? And so how do we have better partnerships that we can be that bridge for those donors to still move resources? At the end of the day, what I care about most is that money is not on the sidelines, that can be invested into our community. How that happens, in some ways, I'm a little bit agnostic to it, but I do think there's a role for Seattle Foundation to play. And so I don't want to draw territorial lines with other folks that do donor-advised fund work. I think the smart thing is, how do we look above the fray and say, how are we moving more money into community in thoughtful ways? And we're collaborating on how that happens at the end of the day.
This is kind of a weird question, but do you ever think about, you see all these athletes that have done well, and they go and set up their own foundations in the community. And do you think of that as a area for prospecting of, why are they doing their own thing and hiring and all this administration and overhead and executive directors? And I mean, why aren't they? Maybe some of them are. I don't know. I'm making some assumptions here.
Did you read my strategic plan? Like, is there a mole inside that's
do you
like
call out the opportunity for athletes?
We are. We are actually. Yeah.
Okay.
Yes. So a part of what we're leaning into is targeted business development as we think about it, right? In the sense of there's always an effort to just kind of go out and about broad and kind of evangelize about the importance of working with community foundations. But something I'm really interested in here, and my team has been smart about, is that this region has core industries that kind of drive what happens here. And so how are we really smart and strategic about leaning into those industries to help people think about how to be philanthropic and bring resources in? And so we do have an artist and entertainer pilot effort that we are launching as a part of this plan to work with teams and start some conversations around that very thing. If you have young players new to community, want to be engaged, how do they think about that? How can Seattle Foundation be a partner in that? And so stay tuned. I'm hoping that we get some good things popping in the next couple months.
Do you think people have a misconception of the Seattle Foundation as an organization that's sitting on just like tons and tons and tons of money that's at its discretion to spend, and you got big endowments, or you got folks from the past that just wrote big checks and you're on an annual basis kind of handing it out, versus the model that you exist under? I mean, is there,
Oh my
do you
gosh.
battle that misconception?
Absolutely. I mean, I had to actually apologize to the Cleveland Foundation once I started running the Seattle Foundation, because I would criticize them all the time about not spending more resources. And then I started running a community foundation and understood why at the end of the day. So yeah, I mean, people see $1.2, $1.3 billion and assume a lot about what you have at your discretion to move.
Yeah,
The
write me a
reality,
check, Alesha.
exactly. And it's like, I wish I could, but it's not my check to write, right? Like, we manage that amount of money on behalf of all the funds that we host for philanthropists, but only about 5% of that, even a little bit less, is what my team has as discretionary resources to move as a part of our core grant making strategy, right? And so there's a lot of work to do influencing with philanthropists versus just being able to say, I'm going to spend 10% of our resources every year. Like, it's not set up the same within a community foundation. And so that is a part of one of the things that we want to think about as we evolve into the future of some community foundations were founded with pretty healthy endowments that were left for the organization itself to drive into community, in addition to supporting the donor advised piece. Seattle Foundation wasn't set up that way. It was purely set up within the pooled resources, then donor advised business. And so if we can endow grant making resources over the next decade so that is more sustained, I think people will then have a little more of a valid case to make of like, Alesha just cut me the check for the things that I would like to do.
Do you think that's a barrier to more people coming to you, like the athletes and entertainers, artists, others, people with high, net income and wealth in the community of like, oh, that's what you're here for. You can help me make smart decisions, have great impact on a set of issues that I care about and that you care about. Is that, did you battle that lack of understanding over your brand, you think?
I think it's a real opportunity for growth, especially as I'm trying to, and I think, some of my peers face this as well. You want to start to have a more dynamic and fresh view of like what a community foundation can be, right? Because most of our fund holder base, they're older, they're well established, right? They're kind of at the point where they're thinking about how to get their kids involved in their philanthropy, or they want to plan for succession where their kids will inherit their funds and continue the work from there. So that's a certain type of donor that you're working with, right? I think in a town where you do have a lot of, 30, 40-year-olds, younger people in the tech world, right? Artists and athletes and others, the opportunity is how do you become fresh and relevant to that next wave of folks that are going to be what, the 90s version of all the tech startup folks were here, right? When they made big money and they thought about how to invest it.
Quick net worth.
Exactly, right? Like, we want to think about that for the next generation. And so I think that's actually a fun opportunity for us, and want to approach it from how we really work with our fund holders now to build trust and relationships so we can be an avenue for their kids to kind of get engaged, but also who haven't we engaged that's out there, even if they're transient, right? Even if they're only here for a little bit of time, but then they move to a new community, how their dollars can still be of use here, and how we can still be a partner for them here, even if they move. Because when you look at the breakdown of where our dollars go, a significant amount does stay within Washington State, but we do have donors that send money across the country to issues that they care about. So we can play that up, I think, in our future as we continue to evolve and grow.
You partner with other community foundations in other areas of the country around investment and impact when you've got donors that want to do things not here?
Yeah, so mostly right now just from a learning standpoint, right? To connect regularly. But like within the state of Washington, we do partner with the other community foundations that are here. All in Washington was a significant effort that Seattle Foundation led as a part of kind of COVID response that really garnered a lot of folks from around the state, right? In partnership with the governor's office to move significant resources similar to what we did on a regional level. So the capacity is here, and we're always thinking about ways to support the region, but then support the state where we can, right? And then where there are interesting opportunities nationally, I think that's an opportunity to grow.
So you have identified transit, housing, childcare as sort of three primary areas of focus and where you want to have impact. How do you describe sort of the current set of challenges and issues in those three priority areas, and like where do you hope to bring unique impact as a organization?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, on the affordable housing front, there's so many folks trying to get at that in terms of, Seattle has clear needs over the next 20 years in terms of the amount of production that's needed across all housing types, right, to be prepared for the population growth that's expected here over the next decade and even a little bit longer. And so the unique role we think that we can play within that space is through innovative financing that starts to fill the gap and help to reduce some of the barriers to more affordable housing being developed in the region. So for us in that space, it really is leaning into 2 impact tools that we built over the last couple years, and we want to take them further. Our Evergreen Impact Housing Fund is a broader tool that we built a couple years ago to really focus in on affordable housing production in the region. We've had 1 project open for leasing. We have another that's in development and many more in the pipeline. So want to continue that work and investment with other partners. And then our Field Order 15 Fund, which we just announced and we're in a fundraising push for right now, is around how do we support BIPOC developers to actually be a part of the affordable housing solution by making sure they have the access to capital and networks to build projects that are meaningful for our neighborhoods and communities. And so that's where we see our lane in the financing space on affordable housing and want to go deep there.
I imagine it's even more relevant with just the challenges around cost of capital, access to capital, and the environment we're in, right?
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. Very much so, right? And so just want to push there. On the transit piece, it's really thinking about transit-oriented development, right? Like how do we create that space where I can catch the bus or the train to work, right? And then be able to pick my kid up and then do all of that and come back home, whatever that looks like. Ensuring that as neighborhoods are primed for continued development, that we're also thinking about transit access to make that connection easier for folks. But there is a big issue we're involved in right now at the state level that as we're looking to the ballot this November and the number of initiatives that will be on the ballot, there is Initiative 2117 that could impact and repeal the Climate Commitment Act, which is a major piece of legislation that is supporting climate justice and environmental sustainability across the state. Beyond that, should we lose that as a piece of legislation that is producing revenue for the state, that's about $2 billion that we're seeing from fiscal impact reports that we could lose, right? And that cuts across in every kind of issue we're talking about, not just in the climate space. And so there's a lot we want to build to around transit-oriented development, but up first is really advocacy efforts with organizations, other funding partners to protect the Climate Commitment Act, because that will then dictate where we go from there.
So some people might be surprised to hear you talk about a community foundation engaged in advocacy and a statewide initiative. Is that typical of community foundations nationally, and is that a new move and new area of focus for Seattle Foundation?
Yeah, so this will mark the 8th policy position we've taken as a foundation over the last, several years on issues that matter. And so it's not new for us, right? I think there is a growing wave of community foundations that are building the courage to step into this space more deeply, because even legally we have the ability to do so. We actually have more leeway to move in this space than our private foundation peers. And so it's about the ability to exercise that more. We're thoughtful on how we engage on any sort of issue, right? I'm always clear that I don't want to be white noise on an issue. If we're going to lean into something, it's because it's deeply tied to our strategy. It's deeply tied to the work that our grantee partners are leading in community. And our board has had vigorous conversations, and we walked through a very sharp kind of decision matrix to decide this is where we're going to lean in. And so something like protecting the Climate Commitment Act through the Known Issue 2117 campaign really is about, we've long invested in climate justice as a pillar of our impact work. Climate justice cuts across so many other issues, whether it's around equity or housing or anything that is sustainable to our environment. And in a community like this, it's like, how could we not, right, lean our voice into this issue? And so it's a lot of thoughtful due diligence that goes in, but it's not new for us. And I think it's a space where our partners are calling us to be more vocal and to be more of a civic leader where we can, in spaces where beyond the dollars, our voice can also have some influence as well.
And then childcare.
And then childcare, which is a build towards the next state budget, pending, we see what happens this fall around the election. But it really is the recognition that COVID decimated so many different industries and areas. And I think childcare was definitely one of those spaces that suffered pretty significantly. And we're thinking particularly about home care providers and smaller facilities that took on much more cost to keep their facilities up to date with COVID expectations around cleanliness and health and all those things. But then also the loss of revenue and support as kids were rightly so at home with families, right? As we were all trying to navigate that time. And so we've long made investments through our social impact lens to support facilities kind of getting up to code, even building out further, supporting the workforce around childcare, which is a huge need within the state and within this community. And so really working with partners on the funding side and the grantee side that as we get to the next state budget, we're clear about the advocacy efforts and investments that we would be asking for to support this field.
So you're most certainly leveraging your political skills you built up over your career.
A little bit.
Back in Cleveland.
Just a little bit, John.
Yeah.
No, but it's been fun. It's been fun to like think about the beautiful marriage that can happen between philanthropy and public policy and advocacy work and narrative work, right? And just how those tools, when used together, you can do some really powerful things in community. And so we want to deepen our ability to do that here at Seattle Foundation.
And you were working on behalf of a business partnership in Cleveland, not right before this. You had another.
Not right before, yeah. But I spent about 5 years working for the Greater Cleveland Partnership, which is the Chamber of Commerce for Northeast Ohio. And so incredible experience to work on local, state, and national issues. I led a coalition of chambers across the Great Lakes region because the Great Lakes region was losing congressional representation because of population changes. And so it got time for New York and Michigan and Ohio and others to band together to say if we're going to increase our voice in the White House and in Congress on issues that matter to economic development and community development and the business community, we need to do that together. So I had the privilege of serving as the director for that coalition for a couple years to kind of drive our priorities through Congress, which was fantastic. I've done a lot of Capitol Bill work, bringing resources from the State House back to local community for major projects, and a lot of local efforts around supporting diverse contractors, supporting education, you name it, I probably lobbied on it to some degree. And so that had always been my experience in that space. I worked at other nonprofits within the Northeast Ohio area doing similar work. Spent 2 years in a private foundation that had always been a part of my life journey. They hired me as a fellow right out of grad school. The former CEO, who's now retired, he was a former county administrator. One of the program officers was a former lobbyist. So like, I think we can see the through line of how I got interested in government affairs. Went off and spent a decade in that career before entering that same foundation again as an executive, right? To lead grant making efforts. And then something called Seattle Foundation started calling me and enticed me.
Yeah, so how'd they find you? Was it just through the search process?
Yeah,
the search
through
firm?
the search process. Yeah. I think a couple people put in my name. The firm called. I said, no, I'm not moving to Seattle, but I'll give you a couple names.
Had you been here before? Did you know much about Seattle?
I did not know much about the area.
Why the immediate no?
Because I did not know much about the area at all. And I was happy.
You were happy in Cleveland?
I was very happy in Cleveland.
There was joy in Cleveland.
There was joy in Cleveland, family, community in Cleveland. But it was 2021 when those conversations started. And, you know, Seattle was, as Cleveland was and other places, was in the midst of a mayoral election, right, where a lot was getting ready to change. We were living through the impact of being in a global pandemic. We were dealing with the backlash against just kind of public safety and the police and what it meant to reimagine that within community. And so I was watching Seattle at that time while also...
It wasn't so joyful.
It wasn't so joyful, right? But also dealing with similar issues in my own community.
Yeah.
And just the desire to think about, like, how do I be of service to this moment in time? That started to connect the dots for me of, like...
So you said no at first, and then you said, I got a couple ideas for you.
I said, I'll give you names. But the recruiter, shout out to Trevor Hooper, was fantastic and like, but why not you though? Can we really just talk about that? And I didn't have a good reason other than like, I just didn't think I wanted to move. So when I let that go and really explored the opportunity and talked with the board and a few people that I knew here, it then became like, well, why not? Like, you absolutely should like lean into the audacity of this moment and go for it. And
so was it the first time here when you flew out for an interview?
Yeah, I came out for a site visit. It was a rainy April few days, right? So it was a lot to take in. in just to kind of like physically look at the place and be in the place and get a feel for it. But something felt just really right about the opportunity itself. And I've told my board this because I know they've been on pins and needles this whole time as they've tried to watch me get settled here. But I spent last November the entire month back in Cleveland. And I loved every minute of it, to see family and be with friends. I worked remotely the whole time. But what it did for me was solidify that as much as I love my home, Seattle is exactly where I need to be right now. Like, it took away any kind of quiet question in the back of my mind about like, did you make the right choice? Absolutely made the right choice.
Oh, that's a good month to get out of Seattle. If there is one.
I mean, I don't know if it was right to go to Cleveland, given I saw a 67-degree day, a snowstorm. Like, I saw all the elements. Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And
but it was
maybe
good.
a little bit more daylight. But not much.
Yeah. But it was good. And, I'm where I need to be.
And this is your first CEO.
This is my first CEO gig.
Yeah.
But what's interesting is that, and this is something that Trevor, the recruiter, was trying to push to me, is I thought about all the components of what a CEO does: manage a board, manage a team, set strategic direction, external affairs, relationship building. I've touched all those components within my career. And so it's like, at some point, any CEO's got to get the first gig to then like be on the track to being a CEO. And so once I gave myself way more credit about like, you have all the pieces and parts, just do the thing, right? Lean into the audacity of the moment. Then I was ready to go.
Is your sense of what the job is today any different than 2 years ago? Or did you feel like you had it pretty pegged of what it took? And
not too bad.
I mean, I
think I would like to think that I'm that good, but I didn't have it that pegged. I think I don't think anybody could have prepared me for, this is like a sidebar conversation you and I can have sometime. But I think the emotional labor of being a CEO, if you care about it that way, right? Like if you truly care about people and you care about teams, so much of this role is about like people, right? Supporting and leading and getting things done through other people and getting things out of their way so they can do that well. And that is something that you can't fully be prepared for because you got to first meet the people that you're going to be doing all of that with. And so that definitely was an adjustment to find my way into, but I feel like I'm doing that 2 years in.
Do you find it lonely at the top?
It can be. I think I've gotten much more smarter about how to find the right confidants and peers, especially if they're not here, right? Like finding people other places that you can call and say, am I crazy about this? Right? Like just that gut check of like, what's going on? Or explaining an issue and you find out they dealt with it like 2 months ago and they can give you the guidance to walk through it. And so I think it's only lonely if we're not vulnerable enough to reach out and say when we need help. And I've tried to be good about saying when I need help.
Do you find Seattle a place where you can be real and people are vulnerable and want to connect in that way? You said there's not a freeze, but
I don't
having
feel
not
a
a freeze is not quite. Not
like
quite
people
right?
wave at me and smile,
Yeah.
right? Like that, so I don't feel a freeze in that sense of things. I think I'm still adjusting to Seattle being culturally different for me than the Midwest, right? Like I'm very direct, right? Like I name a thing. Like if you tell me something, I take it at face value. And I've learned through, getting a couple scars here in the 2 years that like it's not that way entirely here. That it's much more passive, it's much more indirect. You got to read a lot more than just what somebody is saying to know what they actually said to you at the end of the day. And so I'm learning how to navigate that and then also think about how to trust in that kind of environment because culturally it's very different.
Yeah. I would echo that from my time spent in Buffalo. And like I think we talked about this where it's like, I think it's true in Cleveland and other parts of the Midwest where, if you go to a party there with like some family or friends and no one, and you don't know anybody, but you're kind of going along with them and they introduce you to folks like on the way out, like everybody's hugging you. Like it's like you've known them for 20 years.
You just made a whole new family.
Yeah. They just like welcome you in. And I know you can say the same for Seattle, but it's just a different, like the East Coast and some parts of Midwest may be more direct, but there's also a little bit more kind of immediately putting down barriers and, embracing.
Yeah. I agree. That's how I feel.
So we have a couple of standard questions on our podcast. The first is, what was your first job that you took a paycheck for?
Oh my goodness. What was the first one? I was a teaching assistant in a preschool. The same preschool I went to when I was little.
Oh, wow. That's cool.
In my neighborhood, working in the same classroom with the same teacher that taught me when I was little. So it's my first paying gig. Yeah.
What'd you learn there?
I learned what we
Patience.
put them through as 3-year-olds, for sure. Yeah, it's a very intense environment to be working with a bunch of screaming 2- and 3-year-olds, but also really fun to see how early learning professionals approach that and build lesson plans and work with kids and engage them. So that was a fun experience.
Yeah, God bless them.
Yeah.
And our second standard question, our final question is, what's your perfect Saturday in the city of Seattle? Do you have an itinerary that you go to now, or are you still developing your perfect Saturday?
No, I have it. It definitely is sleeping in. Like, I'm one of those weird people that, like, I'm not a night owl nor a morning person. Like, I function better in the middle of the day. And so if I can sleep into like 9 o'clock on a Saturday and then lazily get up and then maybe go for a run, meet some friends for brunch, hit up the art museum or some sort of art gallery experience in the city, some chill time for myself, and then dinner with friends that night, that's a perfect Saturday for me.
That sounds like a good Seattle Saturday.
Yeah.
Full of joy.
Full of joy, Jon.
Yeah.
Yes, I got you.
Well, thank you, Alesha, for making time for this.
Thank you.
In your busy schedule, and for
you.
how you're leading the Seattle Foundation.
Appreciate you. Thank you.
Incredible institution, and you are at the helm, and we're lucky to have you. And
Thank you, Jon. Appreciate you.
Thanks for saying yes to Seattle.
Absolutely.
I hope you enjoyed my conversation with Alesha. Thanks to her for making time to come on Seattle City Makers, and grateful for her leadership of a really important community foundation and organization institution here in Seattle, and wish her the best and love her perspective on the importance of joy to her strategic plan and her work and leadership. So thanks again, Alesha. I want to close out by making a recommendation on something you just got to check out in downtown Seattle. Got a couple of items of note. One, check out the newly redone and renovated Harbor Steps off of First Avenue there in University. One of the great public spaces in downtown. They've done a complete makeover of that public space that steps down to Western between First Avenue and Western Avenue. And there's a new restaurant there. La Pergola is there at the steps with a terrific looking patio, beautiful interior. It's the old Lacosho space that's been redone and looks terrific, getting incredible reviews. They are supposed to have just a wonderful Sunday brunch, complete with a drag show, and you can get bottomless mimosas too, if you so choose. So check out La Pergola over there at the newly renovated Harbor Steps. It looks great, and just in time for the soon-to-be-open Waterfront Park, which will open over the course of the remainder of this year and be fully open in February, March of next year. So a great new entry point to the Waterfront Park, and a great public space, Harbor Steps, made better by some recent renovations. So go check that out. And look for some concerts on the steps this summer as well. Downtown Summer Sounds, the Downtown Seattle Association's concert series, will have at least one concert down there at Harbor Steps. So check out downtownseattle.org for that schedule. It should be released in the coming weeks, with the first concert taking place July 5th at Westlake Park. We should have Pine Street closed down, and a great crowd and great music, and the full lineup coming soon. Thanks, everybody, for joining us on this episode of Seattle City Makers, presented by the Downtown Seattle Association, with support from James Cito and production by Spark Creative.